The recruitment poster peeled off the wall before Dale Harmon could finish reading it. He caught it midair out of habit, smoothed it against his knee, and looked up at the tall glass doors of the Concord Academy. Cold wind moved through the docking bay behind him, carrying the smell of metal and ice. Ships from 100 worlds sat parked in long rows, and cadets of every shape walked past him without a second glance. Some had scales. Some had 4 arms. One had eyes on stalks that swiveled toward Dale and then away, as if he were not worth the effort of a full look. Dale did not mind. He had spent his whole life being underestimated, and he had learned that it was often the most useful thing a person could be. He shouldered his bag and stepped inside. The hall was enormous, lit by pale blue light that came from no lamp he could find. A machine at the entrance scanned him, chirped, and printed a small card with a number on it. Squad 9, Room 4, report by 6th bell. He tucked the card into his jacket and followed the painted line on the floor that matched his squad color. His new squadmates were already there when he arrived, and all 3 of them stopped talking the moment he walked in. The tallest one stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Dale with flat golden eyes. His skin was a deep gray-green, and thick ridges ran along his jaw like armor plating. This was Rennick, though Dale did not know it yet. Beside him crouched a small, thin figure with pale skin and quick, nervous hands. That was Sula. And near the bunk sat a broad, heavy creature with slow eyes and a slower way of moving, whose name was Orin. "That is the human," Orin said, as if Dale could not hear him. "It is smaller than the report said." "It is soft," Rennick added. He did not lower his voice either. "No armor, no claws. I have seen younglings with thicker hides." He turned fully toward Dale now, measuring him the way a butcher measures meat. "Tell me, human, what can you do that we cannot? Why did they put you in my squad?" Dale dropped his bag on the empty bunk and sat down on it. He looked at the 3 of them one by one, and then he smiled. It was an easy smile, warm and unbothered, and it made the small one, Sula, take a step back without meaning to. "I don't know yet," Dale said. "Guess we'll find out together." That answer seemed to trouble Rennick more than an insult would have. He had expected the human to boast or to shrink. Instead, it had done neither. It had simply agreed that it might be weak and smiled about it. Rennick did not know what to do with that, so he turned back to the window and said nothing more. Sula, however, could not stop staring. She had read everything the Concord archives held about humans, which was not much, and most of it was strange. Humans came from a single world, a violent place the archives called a death world. It had storms that could tear cities apart, cold that could kill in minutes, heat that could do the same, and 1,000 small living things too tiny to see that slipped inside a human body and tried to eat it from within. The archives said humans survived all of this. They did not say how. That missing answer had kept Sula awake more than one night. "You really come from Earth?" she asked, her voice small. "Born there," Dale said. "Grew up there, never left it until 3 months ago." "And it is true, the stories," she wrung her thin hands together. "The weather that kills, the sickness in the air." Dale thought about that. "Some of it, yeah, not all the time, but it can turn on you fast." He shrugged. "You learn to keep going, everybody there does. You don't really think about it." Orin grunted from his bunk. "We think about danger, we plan for it, we prepare." He said it like a lesson. A species that does not fear its own world is a foolish species. Dale did not argue. He had found that arguing with people who had already decided about you was a waste of good breath. He unpacked instead, slow and neat, and let them watch. He knew they were watching. He did not care. The 6th bell rang before they could say more. It was not really a bell but a deep tone that shook the floor, and all 3 aliens rose at once, sharp and trained. Dale stood too, a beat slower, and followed them out into the great hall where the whole class had gathered. An officer waited on the raised platform above them. He was old, scarred, and gray, with one milky eye and a voice that carried without a machine to help it. His name was Instructor Vash, and he had trained cadets from more worlds than most of them would ever visit. "You are here because your world sent you," Vosh said. "The conquered does not care where you came from. It cares whether you can be trusted at the side of a creature who is nothing like you when everything has gone wrong and no help is coming." His good eye swept across them all. "In 12 days we will find out. You will be dropped in your squads onto the training moon Hallex. It is cold. It is empty. You will survive there for 6 days together, or you will fail there together. There is no other outcome." A low murmur ran through the cadets. Rennick's jaw tightened. Oren stood very still. Only Sula glanced sideways past her squadmates to the human standing quietly at the end of their line. And Dale, for reasons none of them understood, was smiling again. 12 days later, a drop pod screamed down through a white sky and slammed into the surface of Hallex so hard that every tooth in Rennick's jaw rattled. The doors blew open with a hiss, and cold poured in like water. It was not the cold of a bad morning. It was the kind of cold that reached past skin and clothing and grabbed the bones directly, that made breathing hurt, that told the body in a plain and honest voice that this place did not want it here. Sula gasped the moment the air touched her. Oren's slow eyes went wide. Even Rennick, proud as he was, stumbled as he stepped out onto the frozen ground and felt his legs refuse to work the way they should. Dale climbed out last. He pulled his hood up, tightened his gloves, and looked around at the endless white plain and the gray mountains far off. Then he did something that surprised all three of them. He breathed out slowly, watched the fog of it drift away, and nodded, as if greeting an old rival. "All right," he said, "this I know." The squad had been given very little: one thin tent, a short-range beacon, a ration box, a single heat unit that hummed weakly and gave off less warmth than a candle. The plan, on paper, was simple: survive 6 days, keep the beacon safe, wait for the extraction ship on the 7th dawn. But paper plans, Dale knew, had a way of falling apart the moment the real world got its hands on them. Rennick took charge at once because that was who he was. "We move to the ridge," he said, pointing at a rise in the distance. "High ground. We see danger before it comes." "Ridge is exposed," Dale said quietly. "Winds coming off those mountains. We'll freeze up there." Rennick turned on him. "You question me on my first order." "I'm not questioning you." Dale kept his voice calm. "I'm telling you what the wind does. Feel it. It's already picking up. On that ridge it'll be twice this strong, and there's nothing to block it. We want low ground, something with a wall of rock at our backs." For a moment Rennick looked ready to argue simply to prove he could. But Oren, who had been standing quietly with his back to the wind, spoke first. "The human is right about the wind," he admitted, slow and unwilling. "I can feel it strengthening. The ridge would kill us." Rennick's jaw worked. Then he pointed sharply at a low shelf of rock half a mile off. "There, we shelter there. And human, if you are wrong, you will carry the tent for the rest of this exercise." "Deal," said Dale. He was not wrong. By the time they reached the rock shelf, the wind had turned into something with teeth, screaming across the open plain and throwing loose ice into the air like sand. Behind the rock it was still bitter, but survivable. Dale set to work without being told, showing Sula how to pack snow against the tent walls to trap warmth, showing Oren how to angle the heat unit so its small breath was not wasted. He moved like a man who had done this before, and in a way he had. He had camped in winter mountains as a boy. He had been lost once at 14 for a full night in a blizzard, and had walked out at dawn cold to the marrow but alive. He did not tell them that story. He only used what it had taught him. Sula watched his hands and copied them, and slowly her shivering eased. "You are not afraid," she said. It was half a question. "Course I'm afraid," Dale said, tucking the last of the snow into place. "Being afraid keeps you sharp. You just don't let it drive." He glanced at her. "Fear's a passenger, not the pilot." But she turned that sentence over in her mind and decided she would remember it. They survived the first day and the second. The cold never left, but they learned to live inside it. Rennick grew quieter, watching the human do 100 small things right, and adding a little that he could not find fault in any of them. Oren, who trusted actions more than words, began to hand Dale tools without being asked. Only the true test still waited, though none of them knew how close it was. It came on the third day. Oren was gathering loose ice to melt for water when the ground gave way beneath him. A crack ran across the white surface with a sound like breaking glass, and suddenly the big alien dropped, arms flailing, into a hidden crevasse that had been waiting under a thin skin of snow. He caught the edge with one hand. Below him was darkness that went down farther than the light could reach. Sula screamed. Rennick lunged, but he was too far. Only Dale was close, and Dale did not think. His body simply moved, the way it had been trained by a lifetime on a world that punished slow reactions. He threw himself flat on the ice, grabbed Oren's thick wrist with both hands, and held on with everything he had. The ice bit into his chest through his suit. His arms burned. Oren was heavy, far heavier than Dale, and for one terrible second Dale felt himself sliding toward the edge with him. Then Rennick was there, and Sula, all of them pulling together, and slowly, painfully, they hauled Oren up out of the dark and onto solid ground. The four of them lay in the snow, breathing hard, saying nothing. Oren stared at the human who had reached him first. He did not have words yet, but something behind his slow eyes had changed. And then above them the sky flickered. The beacon in Dale's pack let out a single sharp whine and went dead. Far off, the low hum of the extraction relay, the sound they had barely noticed until now, faded into silence. Dale sat up slowly and looked at the dead beacon in his hand. For the first time, his easy smile was gone. A dead beacon does not look like much. It is a small box, cold and quiet in the hand, and yet the sight of it drained the color from 3 alien faces all at once. Sula understood first. Her quick mind ran ahead of the others and arrived, shaking at the truth. "That is not a drill fault," she whispered. "The relay is gone, the extraction signal, it is gone, they cannot hear us. They will not know where to come." Rennick snatched the beacon from Dale's hand and turned it over, pressing every control as if force could wake it. Nothing happened. The little box stayed silent. He pressed harder and still nothing, and for the first time since Dale had met him, the proud squad leader looked lost. "This is a test," Rennick said, but his voice had cracked. "It must be a test. They are watching. They would not leave us here to die." "Maybe," Dale said. He was already thinking past the fear, the way a person does when panic is a luxury they cannot afford. "But we can't bet our lives on maybe. We plan like it's real. If we're wrong and it's just a test, we lose nothing. If we're right and it's real, planning is the only thing that keeps us breathing." Oren, still shaken from the crevasse, pushed himself upright. "Then what do we do, human?" They all looked at Dale. He noticed that. Somewhere in the last 3 days, without anyone deciding it, the squad had started turning to him when things went wrong. He did not let it show that he had noticed. He simply crouched, cleared a patch of snow, and drew a rough map with one gloved finger. There, he pointed to a spot he had seen on the drop, a thin tower standing alone far across the plain near the foot of the mountains. "Old relay tower. I saw it when we came down. If it still has any power, we might send our own signal, get above the interference, reach whatever's still listening up there." "That is a full day's walk," Sula said. "Maybe more in this cold." "I know. We could die on the way." "I know that too." Dale looked at each of them. "But we'll die for certain if we sit here and wait for a rescue that can't hear us. Walking gives us a chance. Waiting gives us nothing." He stood, brushing snow from his knees. "I'm going. You can come or you can stay, but I think we're better together than apart." There was a long pause. Then Oren rose, heavy and sure, and stood beside him. "You reached into the dark for me," he said simply. "I will walk with you into the cold." Sula came next, small and frightened but steady. And at last Rennick, who hated needing anyone, hated it more to be left behind. He picked up the tent and the ration box and slung them over his shoulder. "Lead then," he said gruffly. But if you lead us wrong, human, I will not forgive it." "Fair enough," Dale said. They walked. The plane went on forever, white on white, and the wind fought them the whole way. Hours passed. The cold worked at them like a slow knife. Twice Sula slowed, and Dale dropped back to walk at her pace, telling her small stories to keep her mind moving, silly things about his home, about a dog he had as a child, about the time he broke his arm falling out of a tree and said it wrong and had to have it broken again. She did not understand half the words, but she understood that talking helped, and so she listened, and so she kept moving. Then the ice betrayed them a second time. It was Dale who fell, not the others. A slab of snow slid out from under his boot on a slope, and he went down hard, tumbling, and came to rest against a fin of sharp black ice. It tore through his suit and into his arm, a long, deep gash from wrist to elbow. Dark blood welled up and steamed in the cold air. The three aliens froze. They knew human biology only from the archives, and the archives had warned them that humans were fragile, that their soft bodies leaked easily, that a wound like this would surely cripple him. They braced themselves for screaming. They braced themselves to watch him fail, to have to carry him, to lose the one member of the squad who seemed to know what he was doing. Sula's hands flew to her mouth. Oren took one heavy step back. Even Rennick, hard as he was, could not hide the dread on his face. Dale sat up. He looked at the wound, hissed once through his teeth, and then calmly he reached into his pack for the medical strip. He pressed it over the gash, wrapped it tight, and tied it off with a single practiced pull. His hands did not shake. When it was done, he flexed his fingers, made sure they still worked, and looked up at the three stunned faces staring down at him. And he smiled. It was tight, and there was pain behind it, but it was real. "It's fine," he said. "I've had worse." For a long moment no one spoke. The wind howled. The words hung in the freezing air. "I've had worse." Sula's mind spun. Worse than this. Worse than a torn arm on a dying world with no help coming. What kind of place, she thought, what kind of life teaches a creature to look at this and call it small? Rennick found his voice first, and it came out quiet, almost afraid. "How?" he said. "How can you smile?" Dale climbed slowly to his feet, cradling his wrapped arm. He looked at them, and behind his eyes was a whole world they had never seen and could not imagine. "Because I'm still standing," he said. "That's the only part that ever mattered." He nodded toward the far tower. "Come on, we've got a long way to go." The storm found them before the tower did. It came off the mountains without warning, a wall of white that swallowed the sky and turned the whole world to noise. One moment the far tower was a thin, dark line against the horizon. The next it was gone, hidden behind a curtain of driving snow so thick that Sula, walking 3 steps ahead, became a gray shadow and then almost nothing at all. "We can't push through this," Dale shouted over the wind. "We'll get separated and lost. We shelter now." There was no rock wall to hide behind this time, only open plain. So Dale did what his world had taught him. He dug. He drove his good arm into the snow and hollowed out a pit, and the others understood and joined him, digging fast, piling the snow into walls around them. They stretched the thin tent over the top and crawled inside, 4 bodies pressed close in a space meant for 2, and set the weak heat unit humming in the center. Outside, the storm screamed like a living thing. Inside, in the small dark, it was almost quiet. Hours passed. There was nothing to do but wait, and nothing to do while waiting but talk. And so, at last, the questions came. It was Oren who asked in his slow and honest way. "Human, on the ice you said you have had worse. I have thought about this for hours, and I do not understand it. What could be worse than a torn body on a world that wants you dead? Your kind is soft. The archives say so. How are you here at all?" Dale was quiet for a while. The heat unit glowed between them. When he spoke, his voice was low and even. "The archives got it wrong," he said. "Not on purpose, they just measured the wrong thing. They looked at our bodies and said, weak, thin skin, no claws, no armor, slow to heal, and they were right about all of it." He shifted his wrapped arm. "We are soft. Compared to you 3, I'm made of paper. If it was just about strength, my whole species would have died out a long time ago. Then how? Sula asked. It was the question that had kept her awake for years. Because we don't quit. Dale said it simply, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. That's the whole secret. There's no trick to it. Our world threw everything at us. Cold that kills, heat that kills, storms, sickness, hunger, animals bigger than this tent with teeth like knives. And we were slow and soft and had none of the right tools. So we made tools. We made fire. We made shelter. And when one of us fell, the others didn't leave him. They picked him up and carried him and kept walking. That's it. That's all we are. We're the ones who kept walking when it made no sense to keep walking. The tent was silent except for the storm. When I said I've had worse, Dale went on, quieter now, I meant it. I've been colder than this. I've been more hurt than this. I lost people I loved and got up the next morning anyway because there was nothing else to do. Everybody on my world has. It's not brave. It's just normal. Where I'm from, giving up isn't a thing you're allowed to do. So you don't. You just don't. Rennick had said nothing this whole time. Now in the dark he spoke, and his hard voice had gone strange and rough. I doubted you, he said. From the first hour, I told myself it was because you were weak, but that was a lie. He stared at the glowing heat unit. I doubted you because I was afraid. Afraid I would fail this test in front of a creature I thought was beneath me. Afraid of being seen as small. I made you carry my fear, and you never once threw it back at me. I know, Dale said gently. It's all right. It is not, Rennick said, but I will make it right. Oren spoke then and admitted, heavy and slow, that he had never in his life expected to respect a human, and that he did now fully and was not ashamed of it. And Sula, in a very small voice, told them her own secret. That once, years ago, in a lesser crisis, she had frozen, had locked up with fear while others acted, and someone had been hurt because of it. That she had carried that shame ever since. That she had trained as a medic to be sure she would never freeze again, and that a part of her had come on this exercise terrified she still might. You didn't freeze, Dale told her. When Oren fell, you were pulling before I was. When I cut my arm, you were already reaching for your kit. You're not that scared kid anymore. You just haven't let yourself see it yet. Sula did not answer, but in the dim glow of the heat unit, her eyes were wet. Dale kept them awake through the worst of it. He had learned that too, somewhere long ago, that in true cold sleep is the thing that kills you, that the body wants to drift off warm and never wake. So he talked. He told stupid jokes until Oren rumbled with something that might have been laughter. He made them sing him the marching songs of their own worlds, and he tried to sing along and got every word wrong, and even Rennick cracked a thin smile at how badly the human butchered the ancient war chant of the Torvani. Hour after hour, he refused to let a single one of them slip away into the dark and the cold. He kept their spirits burning because he knew that spirit, more than the little heat unit, was what would carry them to dawn. And dawn did come. The screaming outside faded, then softened, then stopped. Dale pushed open the frozen tent flap, and pale gray light spilled in, and the world beyond was still and white and silent. There across the quiet plain, no longer hidden, stood the tower, up close. The tower was worse than it had looked from far away. It rose out of the frozen ground like the bare bones of some dead machine, a tall skeleton of dark metal furred over with a thick coat of ice. Half its lower ladder had rusted away. What remained climbed up and up into the pale sky, slick and cruel, toward a small platform at the top where the signal dish still clung, crooked but whole. Sula scanned it with the reader on her wrist and let out a slow breath. There is power, she said. Barely. Enough for one transmission, maybe two, if we can reach the dish and turn it toward the sky. She looked up the long, icy climb and swallowed. If. Then someone climbs, Dale said. He said it the way he said everything, plainly, already stepping toward the ladder, already deciding it would be him. He gripped the first frozen rung with his good hand and tested his weight. His wounded arm throbbed under its wrapping, but it held. A heavy hand closed on his shoulder and pulled him back. No, said Oren. Dale looked at him, surprised. You reached into the dark for me, Oren said. You wrapped your own wound and smiled so we would not be afraid. You kept us awake through the night. You have carried this squad since the first hour. His slow eyes were steady. You will not climb that tower alone, not while I stand here. He is right, Rennick said, stepping up beside them. And this was the strangest thing of all, stranger than the cold or the storm or the dead beacon, because the proud creature who had doubted Dale from the start now stood shoulder to shoulder with him at the foot of the tower. We are a squad, the instructor said it. We survive together or we fail together. There is no version of this where the human climbs and the rest of us watch. He almost smiled. You taught us that. Now live by it. So they climbed together. It was slow and terrible work. Rennick went first, testing each rung, breaking away the worst of the ice with the butt of his tool so the others could grip. Dale came behind him, one arm weak, moving carefully. Oren followed, huge and sure, ready to catch anyone who slipped. Sula came last, light and quick, her medical kit strapped tight across her back. The wind returned as they rose, weaker than the storm but strong enough to pluck at their clothes and whisper that the ground was very far below now. Halfway up, disaster nearly took them. A rung snapped under Dale's boot without a sound of warning. One moment he had footing. The next his legs swung out into empty air, and his wounded arm, weak and slow, could not hold his whole weight on the frozen rung above. His grip began to slide. For one white, roaring instant, Dale Harmon looked down at a very long fall and understood exactly how it would end. Then Oren's massive hand clamped around his ankle like a vice, and Rennick's fist closed over his wrist, and the two of them held him, straining in the screaming wind, until his boots found metal again and his lungs remembered how to breathe. He hung there a moment, shaking, pressed flat against the icy tower. "I've got you," Oren said from below. "I have you, human, we do not let go." "Yeah," Dale managed, and to his own surprise he laughed, a rough, breathless laugh. "Yeah, I'm learning that." They reached the top. The platform was small and tilted, barely room for the four of them, with the crooked dish hanging over the long drop. But the effort had cost Dale badly. The strain had torn his wound open again beneath its wrapping, and fresh blood was seeping through, and his face had gone gray. His hands, when he reached for the dish controls, would not stop trembling. Sula did not freeze. She was at his side in an instant, unrolling her kit, pressing a fresh seal over the ruined wrapping, driving something warm and steady into his arm that dulled the worst of the pain and stopped the bleeding. Her hands were quick and certain, and there was no fear in them at all. "Stay with me," she told him firmly, in a voice she had not known she owned. "You keep talking. Tell me another stupid story about your dog. I will keep you standing long enough to send this. That is my job, and I am good at it." And she was. Whatever the frightened cadet she used to be had feared, that cadet was gone. In her place worked a medic, calm in the middle of the drop and the wind and the blood, keeping the human alive with her own two steady hands. Together they turned the dish toward the open sky. Rennick forced the frozen controls. Oren braced the whole leaning platform with his shoulder so it would not tip them all into the void. And Dale, steadied by Sula, pressed the final switch. For one endless second, nothing. Then the dish hummed. A green light blinked awake, and out across the frozen plain, up past the storm and the cold and the silence, their signal rose into the sky, screaming their location to anyone in the whole galaxy still willing to listen. For a while none of them spoke. They simply held on to the tower and to each other, four exhausted shapes at the top of a frozen world, no longer alien and human, but only survivors who had refused to fall. Then Rennick, staring out at the white horizon, said quietly, "The galaxy had you wrong, human. All of us did. We measured the wrong thing." He turned to Dale. "I will not make that mistake again." Far off, where the gray sky met the white ground, a new light appeared. It grew and steadied, and became the running lights of a ship, its engines a low, rising thunder, cresting the horizon and turning toward the tower and the four cadets waiting on top of it. Warmth, when it finally came, felt almost like a wound of its own. The medical bay of the conquered academy was bright and quiet, and Dale Harmon lay in a bed there with his arm properly sealed and healing, watching the light change on the ceiling and getting used slowly to being safe. It was a strange thing, being safe. On Hallex he had not had the time to feel much of anything. Now that the danger was gone, his body finally let itself be tired, and he slept for most of 2 days. The story of what happened on the training moon spread through the academy long before Dale was well enough to walk the halls. It grew in the telling, the way stories do, but the core of it stayed true. A relay had truly failed. The exercise had turned real, and no one had planned for it. Every other squad on Hallex had huddled where they were dropped and waited for a rescue that took 3 days too long to arrive, and 2 of those squads had needed emergency medical lift-outs by the end. Only one squad had walked out on its own. Only one squad had crossed the plain, climbed a dead tower, and called for help with its own hands. Squad 9. Instructor Vosh came to see Dale on the 3rd day. The old officer stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment, his one good eye studying the human the way a person studies a thing that has surprised him. "I have trained cadets for 40 years, Vosh said at last. "I have read every archive the Conquered keeps on the species that come through these halls, and I will tell you plainly, Cadet Harmon, that the archives are wrong about your kind." He folded his scarred hands behind his back. "They call you soft, fragile, a minor world newly joined of little military value. I believed it too. I looked at you on the first day and I thought that one will fail first." "A lot of people think that," Dale said. "I'm used to it." "That," said Vosh, "is exactly the thing the archives missed." He was quiet a moment. "Any other squad would have died out there. The difference was not strength. Your squad mates are stronger than you and they will be the first to say so. The difference was that one member of that squad refused from the first hour to the last to let anyone give up. That is not a thing I know how to teach, and yet you did it without seeming to try." The old officer's mouth bent into something that was almost a smile. "Rest, cadet. You have earned it, and you have given me a great deal to think about." When Dale was finally well enough to leave the medical bay, he found the other 3 waiting for him outside the door. They had not needed to, he knew that. Squadmates were not required to stand watch over a recovering member, but there they were, all the same, Oren broad and still, Sula bright-eyed and no longer nervous, Rennick with his arms crossed and his hard face fighting a smile it could not quite win. Word had already gone around that they were the closest unit in their whole year, and looking at them, Dale believed it. Something had been forged on that frozen plain that would not easily break. "You took long enough," Rennick said gruffly. But he clasped Dale's good arm as he said it, the firm grip his people gave only to those they counted as their own. "They fed me well," Dale said. "Didn't want to rush off." Sula laughed, a real laugh, and Oren rumbled beside her, and the 4 of them walked together down the bright hall, and the other cadets they passed stepped aside and watched them go with something new in their faces. It was not the old dismissal. It was closer to awe. That night, Dale stood alone at a wide window near the top of the station, looking out at the stars. There were so many of them, cold and far and countless, worlds beyond worlds, and somewhere among them a whole galaxy was slowly changing its mind about a small soft species from a violent little world called Earth. He did not feel like the reason for any of it. He never had. He had only done what anyone from home would have done. You keep going. When someone falls, you pick him up. You don't quit because quitting was never really an option in the first place. That was not heroism where he came from. It was just Tuesday. Footsteps came up behind him, and he did not need to turn to know they belonged to his squad. They joined him at the window, the 4 of them side by side, watching the stars in a comfortable silence that needed no filling. A soft chime sounded through the station. A new posting had come down from the officers. Dale opened it on the small screen by the window and read it twice to be sure. The Conquered had issued a new directive. From this term forward, every survival squad in the academy would include, wherever possible, 1 human cadet. The reason given was short and plain. Human cadets had shown, the directive said, an unusual effect on squad survival under extreme stress. The exact cause was still under study. The results were not in question. Below that was a personal note from Vash. Cadet Harmon was being assigned, once fully recovered, to help train the next intake of cadets. Fresh recruits. Frightened, doubtful, certain the fragile human among them would be the weakest link. Dale read it, and then he laughed softly, and the sound fogged the cold window. Rennick glanced sideways at him. "What is it?" "Nothing," Dale said. "They want me to train the new ones. A whole batch of scared kids who will take one look at me and think I don't belong." He shook his head, and the old easy smile spread across his face, the same warm, unbothered smile that had frozen 3 alien cadets solid on his very first day. "Guess I'd better get ready," he said, "to have it worse." Outside the window the stars burned on, patient and endless, and for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy was paying attention to what humanity had to say.